The picking show's on the road. Yeah, I'm on the road today with Picking with Jamie Walker. And I have a special guest that's going to be on the show today. You know, being a musician there's a whole lot of art to being a musician, to be able to learn how to play and to write songs and to just basically play music. But there is a whole nother side of the art of music. That is building the instruments that musicians play. Well, we're so fortunate in this area to have one of the most outstanding luthiers I've ever met, and someone who builds guitars, Mark Denton. And Mark Denton, he's got a really cool shop around here, and he's going to show us around. Mark, show us around your shop, okay?
I'm really glad you came over, Jamie. I'm looking forward to showing you the shop. We've going to be talking mostly about guitar building, and to this point, the whole thing's been basically all about repair work, so it's not completely all converted and set up and dedicated to guitar building. But I do have one thing I want to show you. I've got a little notebook here that has a 35-year-old brochure on it. That was my very first guitar and my first venture. It was Mountain Music Company. One of my old high school roommates was in art and did that actual logo. And I went and rented an Opay projector over at the library and hand painted my sign, stuck it out front, and then the city come along and put a demand meter on my house because I was advertising my phone number. So anyway, you know, they keep oppressing the artist, but anyway, this section here is going to be where I'm going to start doing all my tuning on the tops and backs. It's going to be a dedicated area just for that. But this is a contraption that I made that has saved me an awful lot of headache. Bending the sides for guitars can be a very, very difficult and frustrating process. And the woods that are most preferable in guitar building are unusually difficult to bend at times. But that machine has helped a lot. And I also have in the background there a press that I made. I don't actually have forms and everything in it, but that right there will actually clamp forms onto, it allows me to clamp or rather glue the top and back onto the rims in one operation without having to have a gazillion clamps. And just recently bought this thing, which is called a go-bar deck. But when you're gluing the braces onto the top and back of the guitar, this allows you to lay them on there and just use these things for the clamping pressure. And then you can get your hands in here to clean the glue up, where having a lot of clamps on there makes it difficult to clean up the glue.
Now, one thing that's kind of cool about this is you designed a lot of this equipment, haven't you?
I did indeed. I mean, I can't take credit for a lot of the ideas. I've gotten them out of books and from other people and pictures from Martin Factory, things they do, but I've actually made all these things.
Well, that's one thing about building guitars. Before you build the first guitar, you got to build the tools to build a guitar. It's not like you can go out and buy guitar building tools.
Yeah, if you really want to make a guitar and not spend the rest of your life doing it, it's kind of like Abe Lincoln said, if you're going to cut down a tree and you've only got 3 hours, you better spend the first hour sharpening the axe. Oh, me. But this is actually doing double duty right now, but this little table saw is set up for only one operation, and that's to cut the slots in the fingerboards for the guitars. It has I've got a pattern and an index form on here, and once I put a fingerboard on here, I can basically cut the slots dead on accurate, and that solves another difficult problem. But I was using it just now to actually slot some kerfing. I'll come back around there, but anyway, I've got just the basic standard woodworking tools that, to be honest, get used more making forms and jigs for the guitars. I mean, they aren't actually used directly in the guitar building because most of that actually is handwork. But there's all sorts of stuff that you have to have them for. And this one is one that has has proved quite handy. But it's a rather complicated looking contraption, but it's got these arms hanging out here over this sanding belt. And what it allows you to do is attach this swinging mechanism here that will then allow you to sand the curve on the fingerboard. Now, the second thing that had to be solved was how you hold the piece of wood on here while it's sanding. And what I have rigged up is with an automobile air conditioner vacuum pump and regular air hose fittings and a piece of wood just simply drilled with holes in it and foam rubber that you can buy at Lowe's. I now have a vacuum holder that when I put the piece of wood on it and turn the pump on, it holds it so tight you can't budge it.
Oh, that's ingenious.
And then I can adjust this thing to sand the curves on my fingerboard. This will allow me to sand any curve I want to, even a compound radius, like some of the electric guitars like to have a rather sharp curve up near the nut, but they like the curve to flatten out near the bottom, so when they bend strings, they won't get buzzing actions from the pronounced curve. And but that worked like a charm, and right proud of that. I also made this little gizmo here to go on the end of it, which allows me to adjust this table up and down and use it to sand little curves on things. I use that to make the bridge actually for the guitars.
There are a lot of parts in a guitar. How many different wood parts are there in a guitar, do you think?
Well, there's primarily your tone woods and the neck timber are usually what you're dealing with as far as the materials. Mahogany is typically used for a lot of the other parts, but now some of the other ancillary parts like linings and things can be made out of different materials. Some builders will use various species of wood for the various braces because they think it will impart a different tone by using stronger or weaker or wider grain woods. But basically the tops are all spruce for the most part.
That's the speaker of the guitar.
That is the speaker. That is 95% of everything. The back, sides, and all that other stuff, all that stuff, you're really talking about 5% of the sound.
Now, the sides of a guitar can be made out of mahogany or rosewood, but the top is always spruce, right?
Not always. Now, there are guitars that have used mahogany for tops and various other relatively soft hardwoods. Mm-hmm. The tone of some of those guitars are surprising when you think that you've learned what makes guitars work, and then you pick up a mahogany top guitar and it sounds almost as good as anything else. You go like, But for the most part, spruce is used because really in the production of sound, in this case, you're looking for strength to weight ratio, and so you're looking for the lightest, strongest wood you can get because that'll allow you to make the most movable diaphragm.
Right.
But the other woods color the sound. The softer woods tend to emphasize the mid-range, while the harder woods tend to emphasize the sustain and the bass response. The harder woods also have their own individual character to the tone, and Brazilian rosewood has always been the favorite tone wood for instruments. It just has an unusual musical tone to it.
Yeah.
It's sort of unusual. No wood really compares to it, but there are many guitars made that are not made out of Brazilian rosewood that sound as good as any Brazilian rosewood guitar. So there again, like the mahogany top, nothing is etched in stone when it comes to building guitars. I had to get this bandsaw because when you have to saw pieces of wood in two wide enough to make tops and backs of a guitar, you have to have one that actually comes up to about 8 or 9 inches. And my little bandsaws, you can modify them, but after coming from the furniture factory, I learned if you need a tool, you go get it. You don't try to, well, you just got to have what you got to have. In here is the spray room and the work in progress holding area. I've got 3 separate storage areas in the building. One is above the bathroom and high up and is containing all my really precious guitar woods, and they're kept at a controlled environment. This room here is also kept at a controlled environment so that while I'm doing work in progress, I can bring it in here and let it just set out, and I don't have to actually keep the entire shop deathly dry. But even the regular shop, I try to keep not much over 50%. So I'm constantly removing water from the air. That's the plague of living on the East Coast and trying to build guitars. They really do have to be built in a dry environment. But I've got some parts in progress over here. It's not super elaborate, we're just getting into it, but here's another thing that I had made. It's actually a jig to use a router to cut the slot for the truss rod. And once it's determined where the slot's going to be, it's just simply screwed in place and a router is run up and down there, and then just a little bit of chisel work will clean up after that.
Now, for those who don't understand what it is you're talking about, the truss rod is the metal rod that goes through the neck so that you can adjust the pitch of the neck so that it makes the strings higher or lower on the fretboard. You want the strings to be low to the fretboard, easy to finger, but at the same time you don't want it so low that it'll buzz if you're strumming. Now that right there is something that it's sort of unique to the musician as much as anything else. Some people like to have what's called a high action, and some people like to have a lower action. People who play bluegrass would, especially if they do a lot of strumming, would prefer to have a higher action, and people who play jazz or something that they're doing a lot of lead work would rather have the strings close to the fretboard. But the truss rod is what does that. How does that work?
Well, actually, the truss rod gets the reputation of being the action adjuster when that really isn't exactly what it's actually doing. The neck on a guitar, to play properly, is not dead flat. It has to have a little bit of forward bow. Now, Martin used to make guitars with no adjustment in their neck, but they did make their necks with that forward bow in it. There just wasn't any way to adjust it, and if by time and maybe too heavy of strings it got excessively bowed, there was no easy way to correct it. But theoretically, a well-made neck will virtually not change over time. But if you want to set an action up really low with a jazz type feel, the neck will have to be more straight than on a guitar that is heavily flat-picked. So the amount of curve that is in a neck is related to the action, but wasn't meant to adjust the action per se. It's also the neck reinforcement. Martin used to put a reinforcement in their neck so that it wouldn't move once they had it adjusted. And the truss rod does the same thing. It adjusts the neck, but it's also resistant to strings.
You know, I know that about Martins. Why do you suppose it is that Martin didn't have a truss rod in a lot of their older guitars?
Well, their attitude was they built their necks so good it didn't need a truss rod. And quite frankly, in the beginning, that was true.
What do you think changed?
Manufacturing techniques and a lot of repairs. Pretty much everything that's been done to a Martin guitar since the 30s and 40s had nothing to do with making them sound good, and everything to do with keeping them coming back for warranty work. I mean, you know, there's nothing new under the sun. There's builders out now spouting all the latest scientific discoveries of how to build a new guitar, And Loyd Lower knew everything about the science of acoustics back in the 20s, and there, quite frankly, haven't been better built guitars since the 30s when we had really good wood, and Martin had a factory full of guitar builders. But that's really not the way it is anymore. Now there's somebody that makes a lot of executive decisions, and then there's a lot of peons that do the hard work, but to build a really good guitar, you just simply can't get out of the slow down, take your time, do it right, and there is an interaction between the builder and the woods that cannot be duplicated in a mass production environment.
And you make custom guitars and do custom repair work here, so let's see some more of the tools of the trade here.
Yes, it's so hot in here, it's time to move on. Well, here we have some work in progress. I'm actually working on 3 new guitars, and I have just gotten the sides bent. And these little pieces of wood we're looking at are what gets glued to the rim, making a surface to glue the top and the back to. Now, my instruments, I make every part and piece. There is absolutely nothing bought pre-done. I do everything. And this right here is a piece of kerfing that hasn't yet been split. It was simply a square piece of wood, had the bevel put on the top and bottom. It then had all the little kerfing slots put in it, and then it will be split in 2 on the bandsaw like this, so that I now have 2 pieces of kerfing.
Now,
to give you a idea of what we're talking about, here we have.
So now this is the kerfing part here.
This is just the simple rim put together on the tail blocks, but if it didn't have some width here, there would be almost nothing to glue to. So the purpose of this kerfing is to be glued to the rim, so you've got something to actually glue the top and back to. It's called kerfing because of all these little slots. These little slots are kerfs. And that's done to allow you to bend it to the shape. The way you actually bend the sides of the guitar, you have to soak the wood in water and then heat it with hot enough temperature to produce steam to allow the wood fibers to bend. But you don't really have to do that with the kerfing because you just cut these little slots, and that's just the way it's been done.
Well, you know, every time I try to bend a piece of wood, it breaks. Now, imagine that. I can't even bow a kite.
Well, it is something that you have to sort of take your time with, and as you can see.
And this is the thing that bends the wood.
Well, no, this is a form where the sides are held while I work on them. And the operation going on are gluing on those little pieces of wood I just showed you. And this is one that's been clamped in place. And I mean, it's got to, it takes several minutes to get all them clamps on there. But you've got to glue everything good and tight. Everything's connected on the guitar, and everything's just got to be tight and solid.
Well, now, do you use these to bend the wood?
No, I use that machine back there. There's a separate machine that I use to bend the wood, but after it's bent, then it goes in these.
Oh,
these are the work forms.
That's right. That's right. You showed me the bend, the bender before. I forgot about that. But this is to put all the doohickeys and tricks and things on there to make it go together. Because if you don't have the kerfing, you can't put the top on it or the bottom on it.
There's not enough, as you can see. This one does not have anything glued on it yet, and it's just a very thin piece of wood. There would be, be like trying to glue two edges of a piece of paper together almost.
So you need this kerfing to make that happen.
You have to have a ledge basically to have something to glue to.
And you start with this over here, and you end up with that over there.
Yep.
Oh, I got you now. Yeah, that's cool.
But I haven't quite got the tops and backs out and working on them. But here's another example of something that I made. This seems like overkill, but this is actually used to glue the fingerboard onto the neck. It's also used in my repair work if I have to replace a fingerboard, but the part about the way the guitar plays depends heavily on precision. And the frets and the fingerboard and all that stuff has to be, I mean, the kind of precision you would find in machining. But anyway, this will clamp the fretboard down, and it gives a 3-point clamping surface. Of course, these two outside rails are dead level, and this inside rail will come down and push on it, and so it'll make sure that after I've machined it all dead, you know, perfect, when I glue it on, nothing moves, nothing gives anywhere. The fingerboards are also pinned in place temporarily so they can't shift anyway. When you first put two glue surfaces together, they want to slide around, and if you have something critical, you have to actually drill little alignment pins and make absolutely sure that it goes together where it's supposed to. This is the most exciting thing that I have made, and is used to hold the top and the back prior to being glued to the rims. After I glue the top and backs together, they will be held in this device and then tuned rather much like a drum head to get to the target stiffness that I want them to. It also allows me to balance the top, so to speak. Given the various densities of woods and things, once you get the top all assembled and everything, it may not be totally smooth, and tapping on it and reading the frequency is one way to determine where it might need to be balanced. There are other techniques that will use vibrations, and you can sprinkle glitter on the top and take a signal generator, and you can see where the thing's vibrating at. But that's sort of a different kind of thing. There's a lot of different ways to do it. I'm trying to do it the way they've always done it. Guitars seem to have escaped the finesse part of instrument building. Violins and mandolins have always been fussed over, and the air chambers have been tuned and the body parts have been tuned. But since Lowood Lower and the early Gibson work, people have by and large not really fussed with the nth degree on guitars.
Now, who is this person you're speaking of?
Lowood Lower is the guy that built all the mandolins that people just run all over the country in search of. He is the guy that made what is commonly known in the bluegrass world as the best sounding mandolins ever. And they command extraordinarily high prices. But the Lowood Lower original signed mandolins is what started Gibson mandolin, F5, basically the bluegrass mandolin. It's all come down to us from Lowood Lower. But he was kind of like Les Paul. He was one of those sort of mad scientist guitar enthusiast, and probably at his death, nobody even hardly knew who he was. And now 80, 100 years later, he's one of the most revered people in instrument building. But got a little table here I made to do sanding work on. When you start sanding, dust gets all flying around. So I made this little table basically out of a 2x4 frame and some pegboard. And by putting a hole in it and a couple little airways in here, my shop vac just makes a great downdraft table. And
so now, does this blow out or
it sucks in?
So this is like the reverse of a foosball table, then.
Right, right.
well, that's really ingenious.
When this is operating, I actually sit here and be sanding with this big giant light over here, and the dust particles are not even floating in the air.
Wow, that is so cool.
But and let's not overlook my light. Here's another one of my little creatures, made out of standard 3/4 and 1 inch plumbing pipe. You have to be resourceful when you're building guitars on a budget.
Wow.
But
You spend more time making tools to build guitars than you do building guitars.
Well, you know, I hope there's going to be an end or at least a slowdown to it, because it would be nice to at some point just, you know, have the guitars appearing at regular intervals. But have just had to get a lot of little parts and pieces one at a time and put them in place and just keep honing my skills. I mean, it's amazing, but 35 years, if you ask a musician that's been playing an instrument that long, most of them will tell you they're still learning stuff. And it's the same true with me. It's like, you know, I'm still learning how to sharpen tools. I mean, you'd think I would have learned that 35 years ago. Well, I did, but, you know, I just know more about sharpening than I did 35 years ago. It's funny. I still remember the old Merry Melody cartoons where they used to show the woodsman sharpening his axe on that old rotary grinder, and then when he would get done, he would pluck a hair out of his head and drop it on the axe, and it would split into two little curlicues. And I have come to realize that you actually can get stuff that sharp.
Wow.
It's pretty amazing, but you can get an edge sharp enough that it will catch on a hair. I mean, not just shave your hair, but I mean, with a little hair standing up on your arm, you can get it sharp enough it will grab the hair. Standing up in the way, it'll grab it.
But
hard to keep them that sharp.
but if you do it over here, it'll get sucked into the table. The reverse foosball.
Yeah. But all that so far has ended up with a few instruments in this. Now normally this has got guitars for customers waiting to be picked up, but right at the moment it's full of my guitars.
Okay, let's crack these guitars out and see what the end result is.
I would love to. I tell you what, let's move some things around, and I'll get some places where we can lay them out and look at them all at once.
Okay, let's take a look at these guitars.
All right, let me show you what we've got, Jane. These two that I'm going to show you first are what are known as an OMD guitar because they're a shallow depth. They're a normal dreadnought in the way they're shaped, but they're just a little shallower, more like a triple O guitar. These two are built that way for a reason, and the reason is I made them from wood that I salvaged from the big fire back in 2000.
See, what fire was that?
Well, when I was operating my business on Memorial Boulevard in the old Reynolds Radio and TV building, that business burned to the ground day after Christmas in 2000. And anyway, I had 50 sets of Indian rosewood back and sides. I was all ready to build my guitars back then, but I was able to salvage some of the wood, and these two guitars are built from that wood.
And so this is rosewood then?
This is East Indian rosewood on the back and sides. This is an Engelmann spruce top on this guitar. It is also an East Indian rosewood overlay on the peg head. And we've got my script where I cut all these little things out of pearl too.
Wow.
I've done everything. You can actually send a logo off to places and get somebody in Vietnam to cut you out 50 of them for about $50 a piece, but I don't know, it just doesn't mean the same. I kind of like doing everything on the guitars myself. I've put ebony buttons on the tuners.
Let me see that again. That's a new.
This is
that's a different feature.
I kind of like the black and gold look, so I've got the ebony buttons and the gold screws on the silver tuners, which just gives it a nice little touch, I think. But I've also have engraving on the snowflakes in the fingerboard.
That is so intricate. Wow, look at that. I'm getting out of focus there. I'm trying to get in close where I can see it.
Of course, we have the pearl around the sound hole on this one, and this is abalone from New Zealand. It's called Powa, but it is a very bluish colored abalone, and I like the look of it a lot.
How do you cut that out without breaking it?
Oh, I didn't show you that little station. I'll show you that before we leave, but it's very dangerous working with mother of pearl because the dust that is created is very sharp and it's very heavy, and if it gets into your lungs, your lungs cannot excrete it.
Oh, jeez.
And so over a period of time, the cumulative effect of breathing pearl dust, it'll kill you.
Do they call that pearl lung?
I don't know, but it is extremely toxic stuff. And so I have a little elaborate vacuum set up to suck all the dust away while I'm sawing on it. But you saw it with a jeweler's saw, and it's just, you have to put magnifying glasses on and get down there and be very careful.
It's so interesting. And you even do that around the rosette of the sound hole.
Well, I did on this one. You can do various things. I don't consider myself an artist, and I haven't really gone to the nth degree trying to be artsy with my guitars. But what I do, I want to be tasteful, and I don't do the same thing on all of my guitars. There are some things I do the same on all of them, like they will all have compensating bridges, which are a little thicker than what you see on most normal guitars, but the string needs just about half of that piece you see to sit on. So if that's all the width you've got, you really could use more. When you adjust each one of these little takeoff points on a compensating saddle, it has to move forward and backward, and if you've got a skinny saddle, if you move them to the rear, they're almost on a knife edge, and it makes the tone a little harsh, and it makes the string a little more prone to break, and it tends to wear grooves in the saddle prematurely.
I've never had a guitar with a bridge insert like that. So now that being compensated that way, that will affect the intonation. It'll make it truer in tune when you play high on neck.
It does. Good players that play all up and down the neck, or people that use a capo a lot, will notice it just working right because of being compensated. But when you compensate the saddle on a bridge and really tune it, it makes the whole guitar sound better. I just had a rather big name brand guitar in last week. The intonation was a little bit off on the guitar. The guy was having trouble putting the capo on it, was the problem. I went and cut and fit him a fully compensated saddle, and when we strung that guitar up, it sounded like twice the guitar that it did. I mean, it wasn't just it played in tune, the guitar sounded better.
Yeah. Wow.
I mean, it was shocking almost, but not all guitars respond that dramatically to such an improvement, but that one sure did. But yeah, that's part of what makes a guitar sound good. If you really get the intonation in, it just helps the sound carry. It's a little hard to describe what it does. Well, I guess,
too, you've got 6 different strings, and they're all resonating, and there is a certain amount of harmonics that when you have different tones that are played at the same time, it's like dropping it's like dropping 6 petals in a pool of water. There's little waves that come from each pebble, and if these things are in harmony, the overall the harmonious sound, or the sound that sounds good, is
when things are out of tune, everybody's working against each other.
Right, yeah. So
when you finally get everything in tune, the tables turn and everybody's working up the same thing.
Right.
It's instead of fighting each other for the sound, they just all line up and work together.
Yeah, that's great.
Teamwork, I'm making my guitars do teamwork.
Harmony. It's in harmony. Yeah, let's see.
But yeah, and this is another one that was made from wood that was salvaged from the fire. This is also East Indian rosewood. I don't know if I'm getting the glare.
Shiny!
So you can see it. This is Sitka spruce for the top of this one. There are a few basic features that will be common with all of my guitars. The shape of the bridge it's not the standard Martin shape. the compensated saddle, the little profile on the end of the fingerboard. That's just something that I'll probably do on all of my guitars. And a luthier's trademark is the crest on the peg head. And so 35 years ago, when I was a young, enthusiastic guitar builder wannabe, I designed this crest to be mine. And to this day, I'm still using it, and I don't see anything wrong with it, so I guess I'll keep it. But this guitar has the Phoenix inlay, and I've got about a half a dozen sets of wood that I salvaged from the fire, and all of them are much better than these. I mean, it's primo wood. But all of those guitars are going to get the Phoenix and my script. They're going to be relatively, you know, all the same, but there's only going to be about 6 of them, and they are going to be special guitars.
Now, do these guitars have different names? Like that's the Phoenix? Or?
Well, as far as model names and numbers, I'm not far enough along to have that really worked out, like Martin or anything. Now, from just a trivial kind of inside story standpoint, they all have christened names. Every guitar that I have ever made, somewhere during the journey of building it, something comes up and gets stuck on it as its name. It's just happened. Now, this guitar here, because it was actually glued together on April 15th, and I had just closed it up and done all this, it got the nickname Taxman. I bet you can't imagine what was on my mind that day. But there was no real rhyme or reason with that other than April 15th. Now, this guitar was christened Thomas. And the reason for the particular name is because at the time I had a cat take up with me and had become my shop cat. And I was actually quite fond of this cat, and doggone if it didn't get run over right in front of my eyes and died in my arms. And so this guitar was somewhere, you know, dedicated in memory of him.
So this is the Thomas the Cat Memorial Guitar.
This is the Thomas the Cat Memorial Guitar. It's exactly what it is.
Now, the Phoenix logo, does that have something to do with your place
Rising
burning
from
down?
the ashes of my fire is exactly what it has to do with. My daughter found an emblem off the internet that proved to be a suitable outline. And so the very first guitar I built after the fire did have the Phoenix in it, and it was called Amber 1. And I have one of these, which has sort of launched my guitar building, you know, in earnest, is an Amber 2, and is built pretty much the same as the original Amber 1. So this one is Amber 2. It's also made out of rosewood. This is Mexican rosewood. It's called Palo Escrita. Rosewood is generally the preferred wood for guitars. Most people like the sound of rosewood. It's not that other woods don't make great guitars, but just rosewood seems to be what most people like. And there are rosewoods available from about every country there is except the United States.
Isn't that interesting?
But this is Mexican rosewood, and I have Asian rosewood on that guitar. I have Indian rosewood on these 2 guitars. I have some African rosewood up in my storage building that's going to be on the next 3 guitars I build. And I have been using some African mahogany. And now all the ebony that is available comes from Africa that's of any value. So you can't get stuck on names too much anymore. You have to just work with what you have. But anyway, back to this one. This one does not have my script on it because it was a recreation of Amber 1. This one's been done just identical, and it is also done in gold colored pearl. And that's why I've selected gold tuners to match the gold pearl on this one. And this one does not have pearl around the sound hole, but rather has wood inlaid in the same place, and it's a very reddish colored mahogany that it just sort of adds a character because this is a red spruce top. It's from the Adirondack Mountains up around New York. It's where the old Martin woods used to come from before they overforested them. And but anyway, the red spruce has red streaks in it, and that little red ring around the sound hole just sort of pulls it out a little bit. It's kind of like picking a color in a picture and then using that color on the frame to enhance the noticing of the color.
And our graphic design, that we call that a neutral color palette. You know, you try to use the colors that are in the photographs in with your text and your background, so that's all in harmony, like we were talking about before.
It's funny, you know, people that don't pay attention to that don't notice it. The people that know what they're doing, it's amazing what the different effect it has.
Yeah, usually,
you know, you may not know what's going on, but it will affect you.
Usually what happens, I'll do something like that, and it says, well, you know, can you put some purple in it or a pink or something? You know, they want some really outlandish color. It'd be like trying to put a fluorescent green in there instead of the other, you know. Some people just, you know, don't need to be in anything creative.
You know, the thing about art that makes it art is it's an exercise in restriction, and it's like holding back just the right amount, because if you try to do everything, it's too much.
Right.
And here's the fourth one. This one is made for an old friend of mine, and it's made out of Asian rosewood, which is the hardest wood I have worked with to date. You don't notice it just looking at it, but the thickness of the wood on the back is as thin as most sides are. It's about 70 thousandths thick,
wow,
which is extremely thin, but it still sounded like a piece of glass. And I have about 5 more sets of Asian rosewood that I just can't wait to start putting into guitars. This one also has the Adirondack red spruce top, and because it's made out of Asian rosewood, I kept with the Asian theme and did a yin-yang emblem. I just seemed appropriate for the Asian rosewood, so that's the way I did that one.
Does this guitar have a name?
Yin-yang.
Yin-yang.
Now there is a somewhat more tongue-in-cheek name, because, as I said, it's for an old friend, and it just occurred to me, making it for him and out of Asian rosewood, that once upon a time at Stereo Village, we used to listen to all the current top records being played, and there was a song for about 2 weeks that played night and day, it seemed like, doing the Wang Chung. And it sort of got to be his nickname for a little while. I'm not sure what it was supposed to signify, but it was apparently something good. And anyway, it was just a distant memory, and it cropped up, and well, I didn't really want to name the guitar Wang Chung, so I decided to do the Yin Yang.
So now this one here is Taxman, this one is Thomas, this one is
Yin Yang.
Yin Yang. And what's this one now?
Amber 2.
Amber 2.
Yeah.
Amber 2.
This is the recreation of the first guitar after the fire, and sort of dedicated to my daughter, and who's, you know, been an inspiration, as with everybody else, and somehow keeping me at this until I finally started building guitars. It's been a long haul.
Okay, I've been trying to contain myself through all of this. Can I play one of them?
Oh, Jamie, you don't even have to beg. It just makes me proud as a peacock to have somebody come in here and play my guitars. I mean, there's just, and that's really all it's all about, is to have somebody pick up what you did and play it and just, you know, appreciate it. Yeah. That's all I want. Just pat my back a little bit. I'll go home and be so happy.
Well, you know, they certainly are a feast for the eyes, and now I'm looking forward to the feast for the ears here.
Well, I'm looking forward to listening to you play them. I unfortunately started out wanting to be a good musician, but that really wasn't what I was meant to be, and so I get to appreciate other people playing my work.
Okay, let's do it. Wow, man, Honey Hush. Oh, this is nice. This is really nice. Oh, what a tone, man. You know, you said you want to pat on the back. There you go, pat on the back, Mark. That's good stuff there. And so now which guitar is this now?
This is the Yin Yang with the Asian rosewood.
Boy, it's got a really nice feel to it. It really does sound good. Got a really fast action to it, and finger pick's good too. Nice, nice. Okay, this is cool. Oh, this is like Christmas. Hey, you know, can I play another one?
You can play all of them, all you want.
All right.
That's all they were made for, is for playing.
Okay, now which one is this one now?
That is Taxman number 18, made from the Indian rosewood.
I really like these ebony tuning keys. That's really sharp.
We got in such a rush, we failed to put the fine tuning on the instruments before we started plunking on them. But
you know, if I touch an instrument, it gets out of tune. You know, it's like, or either that I don't hear in tune. One.
No, it's like it is with me. I'll figure out which string's out of tune and change the other 5.
You know, I thought that other one was good, but I think this one's even better.
It's amazing how much sound comes out of that shallow body.
You know, I didn't understand that till you were explaining that to me. But the body is a whole lot more narrow than I'm used to seeing, and
it actually feels good. The littler,
oh yeah,
it feels comfortable.
But to have a shallow body, it's still got that nice depth to it. I'm a bluegrass player, and mainly rhythm bluegrass, and so I always, the way I judge a guitar, the way I like it, is how that G run sounds. And you know what? Another thing I've noticed about that, I can bear down on this guitar and it doesn't budge. And it's got a nice chop to it. Yeah. All right.
Let's try another one.
Well, let's do another one.
We'll put Taxman away, and here we have the Amber 2. Now, this is a full body depth. And
so now that's thicker.
Yeah, that one's got the. As a matter of fact, while you're holding that up,
put them side by side.
Put them side by side, and you can see that thickness-wise, This is a pretty standard size, and this is right much thinner.
Yeah. Yeah. That's got a nice bright top end too. That. That's really nice. That is really cool. And this is this
Mexican rosewood.
Mexican rosewood. Well, I guess you gotta do.
And the wood goes, finally!
That's about as Mexican as I can get. Yeah. And now this would be just do some good old dirty rock and roll with it a little bit, you know. I'm messing that song up. Let's try it again. I like that. And I see that little pearl or abalone into the.
Yep. Those are our ebony bridge pins with that power abalone in them.
And still got that that.
They all.
Yeah.
That's just part. As far as I'm concerned, that's what's required. I mean.
Yeah. Oh, that's such a nice instrument, Mark. And it plays so good.
It's funny, the action is set up. Most people come into my shop are people that look at guitars, but even before they play them, they'll look at the bass string, and they've gotten used to looking at the bass string, and they think that no matter how that looks, that tells you almost everything about the way it feels. To look at these, it looks like they'd be hard to play,
yeah,
because they're set up for flat picking. But they're not, and you can set them up to play any way you want to. But most people, when they get a hold of a full sounding guitar, they want to frail on it some.
Yeah.
And I mean, if you can't frail on it, there's a lot of sound in there you can't get out.
Well, now, Mark, you set my guitar up that way too. If I can get this to where people can see here, the strings are higher on the bass side than they are the treble side, and so that gives you. A little bit more G-run room there, and so, but you still got that nice close action now when you're doing your flat picking, where you're doing your. I'm not doing a good demo here today, am I?
Hey, you're doing better than I would do.
Well, I'm not going to try to play that one anymore. Let me have another guitar.
Tell you what, there's one more, And it's the other shallow body. This is one I declare, I believe this is my favorite.
I believe mine too. Oh, that's sweet. Honey Hush. Yes, that's my favorite also. Oh, wow. That is really something else. Now how does this one have so much depth to it in the shallow body?
Well, it was just made to move.
Really like that. Oh, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. Oh my goodness, that is as fine an instrument as I've ever had in my hand, and I'm telling you the truth. I really, this is as fine an instrument as I've ever played. It's it's so beautiful too. Just look at it, but it sounds as good as it looks. It's wonderful. So. I would like to invite folks to come out to Mark's place and look at his guitars. And also, I'm telling you, if you're a musician, it really is important for you to find someone who can work on your instruments, someone who knows what they're doing and does it in a good way. And Mark has worked on 3 of my guitars and my banjo. And it's like when I get them back, it's like it's a different instrument. And I'll tell you, those 3 guitars and banjos have a completely different sound to them. And it's just magic what this guy can do to an instrument. And if you are someone who has a banjo or a guitar or a mandolin or a fiddle or any kind of string instrument, and you are looking for it just don't quite have the same zip as other people's instruments, well, you need to bring it over here and let Mark take a look at it. Or if you got an instrument that's broken, that is turned out to be more of a wall decoration than it has an instrument, that's not the reason musical instruments were made. They were made to play. And sometimes they need a little help, and this is the man here who can help these instruments. And also, Not only does Mark do the instrument repair, but he also does and builds wonderful guitars. But you do band instruments and things like that.
I do.
Yeah.
That's at least half of my repair work
Yeah.
is for the school band instruments,
Yeah.
and just whatever it takes to pay the bills, quite frankly.
So if folks want to come to see you, how do they get to your place?
Well, the address is 906B Bob Gregory Street, which is on the east side of town near Hooker baseball field. But my number is in the book, and the hours are Monday through Friday, 9 till 5, and it's probably good to call before you come over, because I've got a dog that I have to take out and walk at inopportune times. But other than that, people are welcome to come over, check out my guitars, play them. I mean, sure, I'd love to sell them, but I'm telling you, I get more pleasure out of listening to people play them than about anything else I do, except maybe building them.
Yeah.
But
well, they sure are certainly a pleasure to play.
But when they're finished, I mean, the end result, the whole thing you're shooting for is to actually get it in the hands of somebody that can really play it, and then you can listen to somebody that you can't believe how good they play make your guitar sound unbelievable. I mean, because you can't make it do that, and boy, when somebody good gets a hold of it, that's the reward.
Well, we haven't seen that today, but this is best I can do.
Oh, you did great.
Even Mark's,
at least you didn't have to listen to me play.
even Mark's guitars, there's only so much they can do, but Mark's guitars can even make me sound better. So that right there is an accomplishment right there for sure. And so now you said you give her a call. What is the phone number right here?
It is area code 276-638-1928. And I certainly want to thank you for coming over and checking out the guitars. It's been a pleasure having you out here.
Me too. And like I always say at the end of the show, when you get ready to leave, always make sure that you carry an extra set of strings in your case. And with a guitar like this, make double, triple, and quadruple sure that back latch is latched before you get up to leave, because you don't want one of these guitars to fall out on the floor. No, that'd be a fate worse than death.